For 28 years, Norway disappeared from the World Cup. But they did not return as legends from the past. They returned as a team built for the present. So how did Norway become one of the most dangerous teams at this World Cup? At the heart of this team is a captain, Martin Ødegaard. He does not lead with noise. He leads with vision. Around him, a fearless new generation began to rise. And one name now demands attention. Nusa. Young, fearless, unafraid to run at anyone. But talent alone does not build a team. Someone had to turn all that talent into a system. Ståle Solbakken. His job was to make the stars work for each other. And that changed everything. And then came Brazil. 5-time world champions. Norway had beaten them once before, in 1998. 28 years later, history came calling again. And this time, Erling Haaland answered. 2 goals. Brazil eliminated. Norway into the quarterfinals. And then they rode. It looked like a celebration, but in a way, it was also the story of this team. One rhythm, one direction, everyone pulling together. And that is why Norway's rise was never just about Haaland. To understand why this team became so dangerous, you have to look at the system behind the stars. But this rise did not begin in 2026, and it did not begin with one victory over Brazil. Years before the world started watching, Norway had already begun rebuilding, because for almost 3 decades, the problem was never a lack of hope. It was what happened every time hope returned. A promising generation would appear. A few talented players would emerge. Expectations would rise. And then, Norway would fall short again. World Cup after World Cup. European Championship after European Championship. The years kept passing. But beneath those failures, something was changing. A new generation was growing up differently. More technical, more fearless, more comfortable with the ball. Some left home young. Some learned abroad. Some entered Europe's biggest dressing rooms before they had even reached their prime. And slowly, Norway stopped producing isolated stars. They began producing a generation. Ødegaard was no longer an exception. Haaland was no longer a miracle. Nusa was no longer a surprise. They were evidence. Evidence that Norwegian football had changed. But producing talent is one thing. Turning talent into a team is something else entirely. And that is where Ståle Solbakken's real work began. Because Norway's problem was never a lack of talent. The problem was distance. Between a striker who lived for space, a playmaker who wanted the ball, young wingers who attacked without fear, and defenders shaped by different leagues, different systems, different habits. Solbakken had to turn all of them into one idea. That did not happen overnight. There were setbacks. There were matches when Norway still looked like a collection of names rather than a team. Too much space between the lines. Too much dependence on individual moments. Too many nights when promise ended in frustration. But slowly, the distances became smaller. The movements became clearer. Ødegaard did not need to do everything. Haaland did not need to create every chance for himself. The wide players began to understand when to run, when to wait, and when to attack the space left behind. The midfield learned how to protect the attack. The defense learned when to step forward and when to survive. This was not a revolution built in one night. It was repetition, adjustment, failure, and then adjustment again, until something subtle began to happen. Norway stopped looking like a team waiting for its stars and started looking like a team that knew how to use them. By the time the road to 2026 began, the question was no longer whether Norway had enough talent. The question was whether all those years of waiting had finally prepared them for the moment ahead. And then, the road to 2026 began. Not with certainty, not with the world watching, but with a quiet belief that this time, Norway might finally be ready. The talent was there, the structure was taking shape, and for the first time in a generation, the dream no longer felt impossible. But belief is easy when nothing is at stake. The real test begins when expectation arrives, when every mistake becomes louder, when every opponent knows where your danger comes from. Stop Ødegaard, deny Haaland the space, force the young players into decisions they have never had to make before. That was the challenge waiting for Norway. Because by now, they were no longer invisible. The world knew the names, the world knew the threat, and opponents began preparing for them accordingly. So Norway had to evolve again. They had to learn how to win when Haaland was surrounded, how to create when Ødegaard was denied time, how to attack when the obvious path was closed. And that is where the rest of the team began to matter even more. The runners, the pressers, the players willing to make the movement that never appears in the highlight, the defenders willing to step into danger, the midfielders willing to run so the stars could breathe, the young players who did not carry the weight of 28 years because they had never learned to fear it. And slowly, something changed in the way Norway carried itself. They were still outsiders, but they no longer played like outsiders. They stopped asking whether they belonged and started asking how far they could go. Then came the World Cup, and suddenly, every lesson had to survive reality. There was no more time to talk about potential, no more patience for what this generation might become. The tournament demanded answers. Could Norway control the pressure? Could they survive the moments when the plan broke down? Could they win when the game became ugly? And most importantly, could they keep believing when the world finally started believing too? The answer did not arrive in one perfect performance. It arrived in moments. A run made at exactly the right second. A pass played before the space had fully opened. A defender stepping forward instead of retreating. A teammate covering the ground someone else had left behind. Small decisions, repeated under pressure. Until the team that had spent decades waiting began to look completely comfortable on the biggest stage. This was no longer a collection of stars hoping for a miracle. This was a team. And then came Brazil. Brazil did not need an introduction. 5 stars on the shirt, a history that had shaped the World Cup itself. For generations, teams had entered this kind of match hoping simply to survive. But Norway had not waited 28 years to be afraid. They pressed, they ran, they trusted the spaces they had learned to create. And when the moments came, they took them. Haaland did what Haaland does. But this victory was never only about Haaland. It was Ødegaard seeing the game before others could. It was Nusa attacking without fear. It was every run that pulled a defender away. Every tackle that stopped danger before it began. Every player choosing the team over the moment. And when the final whistle came, Norway had done more than beat Brazil. They had answered the question, how did Norway become one of the most dangerous teams in the world? Not through one miracle, not through one superstar, but through years of failure, a generation that refused to carry the old fear, and a team that finally learned how to move as one. 28 years after their last World Cup, the Vikings were no longer sailing back into history. They were sailing forward,